Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the reason why some Conservative MPs are reported to be wanting to lose the next election. In fact, it could be argued there are several different groups of Tories who all see it in their interest to lose the election. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So this is a rather odd concept, isn't it? Tories wanting to lose the election. See, I often say the Conservative Party are so desperate to win elections that they will readily drop what few principles some of them have in order to gain power or retain power. Brexit indeed was one such example of this. Most Tory MPs knew Brexit would be a disaster. They definitely knew the hard Brexit would be a disaster. Total madness. But they backed it for fear of losing power if they didn't. There's often an emphasis on the motivation to stop the party splitting, but that's not the main aim in itself. Like, why would the party being split be a problem? Because it would make it impossible to win power. This is always about power. Yet, we now have reports of Tories wanting to lose. And I'm referring to an article written a few weeks ago in the Express, actually, to begin with. But I'll also point out, a few other reasons which will have Tory MPs hoping for an election defeat. But the Express comes at it from the angle of Tory MPs who think that losing is the only way to save their party. Now, those anonymously quoted in the article seem to cite two main problems as far as I can tell. The first is that the party isn't Conservative anymore. Now, this has become a loaded expression of late. See, objectively, it is true that the Conservative Party are no longer Conservative. They're ripping everything up. They're not conserving anything. If their heroes could rise from the grave, Zombie Churchill and Zombie Thatcher would beat the crap out of all of them. The party has basically been taken over by a mix of the more strategic elements of the BNP and UKIP. But it is those BNP and UKIP elements, the ones arguing for the more insane and extreme policies, who are arguing that they are the real Conservatives and that the likes of Rishi Sunak and co are actually left-wing. So when you hear Tories saying their party's not Conservative anymore, it's not always clear if they're being genuine or not. For example, one quote says this: "The problem is that we have more MPs in the party who are really Lib Dems." Now, to those on the extreme right, any traditional Conservative will be indistinguishable from a Lib Dem. In fact, for those on the extreme right, there might be some moderate Conservatives who are indistinguishable from a communist. This is why they will describe the likes of Rishi Sunak as being left-wing. It's often the case for those on the extremes of politics on either end that they are unable to distinguish anyone that's not them from the complete opposite political pole. The second problem is the lack of political acumen in cabinet. This is absolutely true as well, objectively true. There will be people across the right wing who can see it. Another quote says this, for example: "Our cabinet is full of people who are not political. They are just managerial. They don't believe in anything and they don't know how to fight for anything." And this is certainly true. But it's a direct consequence of their Brexit. Sometimes you'll say about people in terms of their principles, well, they're doing this so they don't have any principles. And sometimes what they're being is pragmatic. There are things you need to do to win an election. But if you look at, say, Rishi Sunak, it's like, well, even behind the scenes, what is he trying to do? What has he actually done? What has he done as Chancellor? What has he done as Prime Minister? And the answer is nothing, really. Like, what does he stand for politically? I don't know. And I've paid a lot of attention to him. I can see that behind the scenes, what he's actually doing is taking every opportunity to make himself or his wife or his father-in-law richer. We can see that. But in terms of politically, what has he done politically? Nothing. Not only did Brexit jettison some of their more politically astute colleagues in 2019, but the nature of Brexit means that actually management is all they can do to keep a lid on things. That is what party leadership is nowadays, keeping a lid on things. Brexit was supposed to heal the Europe-based divisions in the party, but it didn't. It made them worse. So all you need is a leader who goes around putting duct tape on everything. Making changes to the country, that requires planning. You have to have a plan, but there's never a plan. Sunak and Johnson, they've talked about plans. Oh, we've got a plan for this, we've got a plan for that. Oh, can I see it? Oh, no, you can't see it. Why not? A plan requires a detailed analysis of where you are and an explicit route to where you want to go. But a frank analysis of where we are and what's needed to get to where we want to be means facing up to the harsh realities of Brexit. At least behind closed doors. You don't always have to admit to these things in public, but behind closed doors you have to be frank about these things. But the Tories can't do this even privately with one another because they are comprised of a mix of Brexit zealots and those who only went along with it to save the party's electability. So they can't even talk frankly amongst themselves. So Brexit turned the party from one which needed a reforming leader to one which needed someone just to keep a lid on things. In other words, they created the conditions whereby they needed a manager more than a politician. Not that they even got this. Rishi Sunak would be a rubbish manager. He understands nothing at all about his role, political or otherwise. Like, consider his 5 pledges, just as an example. They were chosen because they'd be easy, that they would happen regardless of anything else. They would just naturally occur. So he made his 5 pledges to make it sound like it was challenging, but in reality it was supposed to be automatically achieved. But he's not achieving them. Every single one is failing right now. And this is just one of the ways in which you can see that his political advice is very much bottom drawer. Because a good manager would have at least hired good advisors. If he'd had good advisors, they wouldn't have advised him to go for those pledges because they'd have said, a good advisor would have gone, actually, these aren't as easy as you think. You know, Sunak's advisors are so bad that on one occasion, one of them even persuaded him to film himself breaking the law and then post the evidence online. So now he's been found to have broken the law as both Chancellor and Prime Minister. Well done there. Not a page in the record books anyone wants, is it? Other than as a dare. But it's not just Sunak. I think it's fair to say most of the cabinet are just people who are there to keep a lid on things as well. We've got a health secretary who's arguing that we should have less healthcare. An education secretary who wants people to have less of an education. We'll be talking about that this evening. A home secretary recruiting criminals and drug addicts into the police. We've got a chancellor who is on record saying, oh yeah, recession, lovely. Let's have a recession. And in an election year as well. If someone were to write a book on how not to do politics, it would feature our current cabinet as prime examples. So I can well believe there are Conservatives who actively want their party to lose, even though it means the risk of finding themselves, say, fighting future elections under proportional representation. They're kryptonite. Just because they can see no way to reform the party in government. After all, who reforms their party in power? You wouldn't, would you? It would mean doing something radically different to what won you the elections. Only an idiot would do that. You change a losing team, not a winning one. But there are others who are invested in election loss as well. You know, there are 2 distinct factions who seem desperate for an election loss. And it's not really got much to do with wanting to reform the party as such. They're sort of quite happy with where the party is. It's more about seizing power for themselves to determine that direction. There's the Brexit purists, who might at the moment be considered to be represented by their lunatic-in-chief, Suella Braverman. Then there's the free market purists, represented by their lunatic-in-chief, Liz Truss. Now, these factions are already mobilising for the anticipated election loss, so that they give themselves the best shot at having one of their tribe made the next party leader. And I think it's probably fair to say there might well be a widespread desire to see the Conservatives lose the next election. I keep coming back to their attitudes to elections. Like, you look at the local elections that happened this May and the by-elections, which are on in a few days' time. And really vital elections. The local elections were hugely important. These by-elections, incredibly important. Rishi Sunak loses all 3 of these. That is a disaster. It shows the public that they are on their way out. If you want any chance of winning the next election, you have to convince people that actually, maybe what the polls are saying is not quite accurate, that when it's put to the real test, a real election, actually we're doing all right. But that's not happening. These are vital elections. Yet where were the cabinet? Hardly any of the big names did any campaigning. The Labour top brass have been out and about in force for the local elections, for the by-elections. The Tories are very thin on the ground. Conservative Party Chair Greg Hands has been doing almost all of the heavy lifting. Rishi Sunak's popped out once or twice. Penny Mordaunt I saw out once. I think that was pretty much it. The rest of the cabinet, if they are out and about, they're not exactly publicising it. I'm not seeing evidence. And if the cabinet Those you would think are the most invested in retaining power because those are at the top of government. If they cannot be bothered to campaign, then what must the feeling be like throughout the rest of the party? But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.